My guest today has directed episodes of Earth Final Conflict, Gene Roddenberry's Andromeda, Stargate Atlantis, and that doesn't even touch on his feature film work. Stick around.
Welcome to DiceGeeks.com Tabletop RPG Show. Level up your RPG campaigns by filling yourself with stories and knowledge. Explore topics from archaeology to film history to writing to literature and much, much more. This is DiceGeeks.com Tabletop RPG Show.
Hey guys, welcome to the show. My name is Matt, and I am your host. This is the DiceGeeks.com Tabletop RPG Show. This is the show where we learn how to become better game masters and better role players by filling ourselves with stories and knowledge. It is my intention to bring you game designers, RPG writers, filmmakers, historians, archaeologists, and other fascinating guests so we can learn about all kinds of interesting topics so we can then use that knowledge at the gaming table. Oh my gosh, guys, I am so excited about today's interview. As you may know, I had went to college to become a screenwriter and a filmmaker, and that was kind of my childhood dream. I've given up on that, or at least pivoted away for a while, but my love of movies and television shows has continued, and I think it is just a product of me playing Dungeons & Dragons when I was a little kid and playing other role-playing games, this urge to tell stories, and I've always had that urge that I just want to tell stories, and so trying to become a filmmaker and a screenwriter was the way I was doing that when I was younger. And now, of course, I write resource books for RPGs. But my guest today is a phenomenal film director and TV show director. Just blows me away that I got to talk to him. I was, as I mentioned in the interview, I was sitting in college obsessed with science fiction, fantasy, filmmaking, and writing, and I was watching episodes of Earth Final Conflict and episodes of Andromeda that he had directed, and it was just an absolute pleasure to get to speak with him today. So here's the interview. My guest today has directed numerous feature films. He has also directed episodes of TV shows like Earth Final Conflict, Andromeda, Stargate Atlantis, and Sci-Fi's Van Helsing. David Winning. David, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks for asking me.
Let's just get started off at the beginning. What made you interested in filmmaking?
I couldn't get a real job, so I figured I would. No, when I was a kid, my dad, kind of with a lot of forethought, actually my 10th birthday, got me a little movie camera, which I was kind of glued to all through my teens. And I just thought, gee, I wonder if there's some way to make a hobby into a career, which I think is what everybody should try to do if at all possible. Mm-hmm. So, I spent my teen years making little short, silly movies in the backyard. And then, I did a couple of short films. And then in my early 20s, I was thinking, I'm going to go to film school. So I started raising money, and my dad was helping me out, and I was working as a bouncer and a ticket taker and all sorts of odd jobs in my early 20s. And eventually I had this brainstorm that I was going to, I'm not going to go to film school. I'm going to use the money we've raised and make my own movie. So in the 80s, I basically spent about 4 or 5 years shooting my first feature, which was called Storm, and finally getting it released. And then that kind of led to a whole television episodic TV career, which started in the late 80s, which was great. My first TV series was Friday the 13th, the TV series, not based on the movies, but it was sort of a low-budget midnight kind of cult series that was on in 89 and 90, and eventually got canceled because it was too violent and strange. But that's kind of how I got into it.
Now, I think I did read something online that you just fairly recently directed 6 movies in 7 months. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, it is possible in the low budget world of movies. 3 or 4 years back, I did 6 movies in 7 months, 6 thrillers for a Spanish company and a producer in Los Angeles named Tim Johnson, who hired me to do a lot of these movies. And basically I was, movies, basically these kind of things are all shot in 3 weeks. So you prep for 3 weeks and then you shoot for 3 weeks. And so I would be prepping and then shooting the movie and then coming in the last week of prep on the next movie and kind of playing catch up. And I was real tired after 7 months, but it was quite cool. We actually got 6 cool little thrillers shot. I think it's a few years back. It's like 2016. Okay. And then that kind of transitioned into working for Hallmark Channel, which I've been doing now since about 2017, 2016, 2017, which has been great. And then while doing these Hallmark movies, I've also been simultaneously shooting episodes of very violent vampire series on Netflix called Van Helsing.
I would have not thought it was humanly possible to do 6 movies in 7 months, but
well, it's not all me. There's a huge support team too,
sure.
But it was it's the kind of thing where they just they had a lot of these things are packaged now, so they'd have like a package of maybe $6 or $7 million, and they want 7 movies out of it, and they want it in a certain time frame, so they can air it in places all over the world and stuff, and that's kind of how it happened.
A lot of people want to work in creative careers and things like that. So you just went ahead and made your own movie. Is that something that you recommend to people?
Absolutely. I don't bash film schools. I think film schools are a great training ground. And in some cases, it's a lot of places where it's the only place that directors and producers and even actors can get their hands on equipment. And so from that point of view, it's a great avenue. But I just decided kind of early on, I'm a kid from the Canadian prairies, and I'm heading down to Los Angeles, and it was a little bit daunting. So I thought, well, why don't I just try and make my own movie? And one of the things I always recommend to people is that if they want to kind of just burst into the film business and they have no money and no resources and basically nothing, is to try to shoot and I'm sure you've encountered this with people, is to try to shoot a trailer of the movie you want to make, but you don't have enough money to make it. So then you end up getting a commercial for the movie that doesn't actually exist yet. And you can use it as a great calling card. So, when I started, there was no digital equipment, and there was no, the kind of broadcast quality equipment now you can get with digital just didn't exist in the 80s when I started. So we were shooting with old 16 millimeter film cameras. And so that's kind of my advice, is just to go out there and just try and do it. Don't wait for people to ask you to do it. Just if you think you got some good ideas, just go out and try and get them made.
As I was mentioning off air, I studied filmmaking and screenwriting in college, and I did some kind of guerrilla filmmaking, I guess, but it's kind of laughable talking about with you, seeing the stuff that you make.
No, it shouldn't be, because that's where I started. If I had the choice, it may seem like I'm at a pinnacle now, but I'm not really. I'm always trying to get jobs now too. And some of my favorite stuff is the guerrilla style stuff. That ends up being some of the most creative stuff you make, and then when you start working in rigid systems for networks and stuff, they have a certain kind of pattern of shows that they want, and it kind of becomes, you still have an influence on it, but you're less directly involved with the stories and the outcomes. So as I've always told people, I'm always sort of desperately trying to get back to the independent world. I did 2 independent features when I started, Storm and a film called Killer Image with Michael Ironside, and that was in early 90s. And then I just kind of fell into let other people raise the money and direct other people's shows, which was incredibly lucrative, right? Obviously, I make money and I can pay bills, and it's also been an incredible education at other people's expense, because I'm no longer trying to raise the money to make independent features.
Yeah.
But there's something to be said for getting back to that world, because that's where it's most creative.
And I guess that's pretty much why I stopped trying to make and write movies, is because I couldn't. I didn't have enough money to eat. So
well, you do kind of have. There is that little thing about paying rent and feeding yourself.
Yes.
Kind of important.
Yeah, absolutely. And then just to kind of talk about some of your TV work, though, directing episodic television. Some of these shows that I mentioned in the intro, like Earth Final Conflict, Andromeda, Stargate Atlantis, especially Earth Final Conflict and Andromeda, these were shows that I was watching when I was in college, and I was kind of obsessed with filmmaking at the time, and just watching, just kind of fascinated. Of course, I love science fiction and fantasy as well, and just watching episodes that you directed. I was just going to ask, maybe you could kind of, what does that look like when you're hired to direct a TV show? Like, what does that look like? How long do you have? Like, if they give you a script, how long do you have, and things like that? Can you just give us an idea?
Yeah. TV series are even more rushed than the MOWs. Usually, it's anywhere from 8 days of prep, and then suddenly you're fired down the tunnel, and you're on set for 8 days, 7 days. I'm being liberal, because a lot of the shows I've done have been like 6-day episodes. I've been around a long time, so I got a long list of TV shows that I've worked on. But I did the Breaker High series with Ryan Gosling, which was sort of a comedy thing that was on Netflix in the mid 90s. And we did the pilot and the first 7 episodes in 20 days.
Wow.
You can imagine that. So we were shooting like 2.5 days an episode.
Wow.
And it's the kind of thing, like, it's a factory. The business is just a factory, so you're just trying to crank the stuff out as fast as you can, because they've got certain air dates and stuff like that. But it's a very fast business. But most of the series work is like anywhere from 7 to 8 days prep and 7 to 8 days of shooting, and it's shot in a checkerboard style. So while the crew's shooting one episode, you're busy prepping another episode, and then when they're done, you're on set with your episode. So basically, the filming crew never gets a break. They're working the whole season, the whole 6 months or 8 months or whatever a TV season is like. You know what I love, Matt, is when you say that you saw episodes of shows that I did and that got you inspired. You know what got me inspired?
What's that?
When I was 10 and 12, I was watching like the original Star Trek, because I'm really old.
Oh, yeah.
And so I was obsessed with that the way you were with Andromeda and Earth Final Conflict.
Yeah.
And I basically taught myself filmmaking by watching those shows and thinking, okay, this is how they did that, and breaking it all down, kind of like reverse engineering. That's how all of us kind of get into the film business, right? Because we want to do that, but we don't quite know how they do it. So
I was obsessed with the original Star Trek as well, watching it in reruns. And then I grew up on Next Generation, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a big battle. Star Wars or Star Trek, Next Generation or TOS. But I'm old enough that I saw the original Star Trek when it aired.
Okay.
I don't like to admit, but I've been around a while. So.
Well, I like Star Wars and Star Trek, and I'm cool with the original series and TNG, so I'm good with it all. But
good for you. Well, you can imagine it was kind of a thrill for me when I got Earth Final Conflict, because it was a direct Roddenberry connection, and I thought, God, it's like full circle. This is where I started. And that was working with Gene Roddenberry's son on the series, who was one of the producers. Was just incredibly cool.
Yeah, I can only imagine. I can only imagine. When you get a script for a television episode, as a director, what kind of changes do you get to make? What kind of influence do you have on the script?
Well, it always depends. It always depends on how heavy a hand the producers have on a show. Sometimes if you come into a series late in the run, like if you come into a series when they've been shooting 4 or 5 seasons, you're not going to have a lot of input that they even want to listen to, because they're kind of set in their ways. So it's much more fun for me to come in on a series early, like I did on Andromeda. I directed like the 3rd episode, or even a kid series like Nickelodeon. I came in on Goosebumps, like episode 3 and stuff, and I just did one of them. But that's when you get a chance to try to mold the series a little bit the way you like it. But I mean, as I get older, obviously people give me a little bit more respect, and you get a little bit more clout when you're directing episodic television, because they realize you've got, obviously, I mean, I've directed 28, 29 series now, so I've kind of been around. And I think the thing you do when you get a script is the function of a director is just I'll back up a sec. When I did my very first series, Friday the 13th, they hired me on a kind of a whim, because one of the directors got sick, and they said, well, hire this guy. Winning sounds positive, hire him. So I came in and I was like 27 doing this network series for Paramount. And they gave me just, the crappy script. It was about killer bees or something. And so there I am, this hungry 27-year-old, anxious to try to make an impression. So you take that script apart and you fix it and rework it as you can, without offending writers, or you work in conjunction with the writers. You try to make it the best episode you can. And I ended up getting a bunch of nominations for the Friday the 13th episodes way back, 30 years back. And I was really proud of that. And it took me a long time with episodic TV to realize how much influence you could have over the series. But I think anytime you get anything, anytime if somebody slapped a script in your hand today and said, here, we want you to direct this, obviously you would do whatever you could to improve on it. Hopefully you like the script, but you always want to improve on it. And, I've spent so much of my career just trying to imitate movies and shows that I loved, from sci-fi to, anything that I was influenced by. So I think good directors kind of you're always trying to improve the script and make it as interesting as you can. And if it involves major changes, you suggest them to the producers and the writers during the prep days. It all happens so quickly, that they kind of rely on you and your experience to just sometimes, in some cases, to take a really green script that's not ready for production and just kind of fill it in with your experience and think, well, instead of doing this, why don't we do this? And why don't we cut this scene out because it'd be too expensive? And, wouldn't it be cooler to do this with this storyline? And so you definitely have some influence.
Do you also have influence over like certain set pieces and things? Because I just noticed certain shots will, like they'll crane over a certain set and things like that. Obviously, that has to be prepped in advance.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. That's just all part of, I mean, I'm quite serious about imitating, being the sincerest form of flattery. I have stolen so much stuff from things that I saw growing up that I thought were cool. And when I read scripts now, things remind me of certain things, and I'll think, well, this would be like that episode of such and such that I saw when I was a kid, or a Night Gallery episode, or something from Twilight Zone or something. And so you get influenced by that kind of thing in terms of camera angles and crane shots and all that kind of stuff. It's all really comes down to just trying to develop moods with angles and the coverage that you do. A lot of people are kind of like, they think you get a script and it's like, well, what is there to directing? Because all the scripts, the words are all just written down, but you have to figure out how to place people and how to choreograph sequences so that they make the most dramatic impact or comedic impact or emotional impact. If it's a Christmas movie or something, it's kind of up to the director to figure out the choreography, not just the camera angles.
I think that was something that I don't know. I was so naive when I was doing some of my filmmaking and stuff like that.
Me too. Oh, I love my first movie. I look at my first movie and I think, boy, you were naive. You had no idea what you're doing. But sometimes you capture an energy you'd never get again, just because you are green, and it's kind of wonderful. I love those early movies.
I don't know, maybe like an example of how do you place people in the certain scene to give it like more power or something.
Well, it's hard to describe specifically unless you're talking about. I'd have to actually look at a sequence. I mean, to me it feels like every time I get a scene or a script, it's new every time, which is cool because you're always trying to be kind of like that green naive kid. Every time you look at something, you're trying to think of some different way to do something. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's a certain amount of imitation you do, and then there's also a certain amount of trying to innovate stuff because you don't want everything to look the same. And one of the cool challenges when you come into a TV series is you have, in one way, you do have to fit into the family and make the shows. You have to make the shows look like all the other shows, but you also want to try to make yours look a little different. So it's kind of it's a tightrope walk of trying to follow the Bible of a series, but also make your show stand out so that people go, "Hey, bring that guy back." That was an interesting episode, and that's always what I've been trying to do when I was starting out. I mean, now I guess I'm established, although I still feel like I'm always scraping for the next job, but. I don't know what my style is. It'll be 100 years after I'm gone. People can determine if there's some kind of style. I don't know if you've seen a couple of my shows. I don't know if you can see any kind of style or anything. I just, one of the producers I worked for that started me out of my career is Alan Eastman, who was one of the producers on Andromeda. Mm-hmm. And he used to always brag that I had the Lubitsch touch. There's a German director in the 40s, I think, named Ernst Lubitsch. Yeah. And I didn't know what he meant. I had to look it up. And Ernst Lubitsch was famous for trying to give, no matter what the sequence is, trying to give it a lightness and kind of a sense of humor, which I love to do in these shows. When I started out, I was always directing what they call, quote unquote, the girl shows, which I love to do because they were always more emotional and funnier and stuff. But and then finally they would give me some of the heavy action shows, and they're like, "Oh, he's good at that too," which is kind of where I started. That's really what I wanted to do, was thrillers and action stuff. But I don't know. I always try to find some way to make any scene light, because you got enough heaviness in life. So it depends on the nature of the shows and the scenes. So it's a roundabout. I don't know if that answers your question. It's a very it's a very scene specific kind of way of how you place actors in a scene, and it's about, I think, what directors, the most important quality you have to have is taste. You have to have good taste. So basically, like, you sit there and you look at something and you try to figure out why it's not working, if it's not working. And so my shows end up, when you see stuff that I've done, it's my taste, and like it or hate it. It's kind of, I've looked at something and tried to fix it or improve it or make it funny or more dramatic or whatever. It's just a case by case basis. Because
in preparation for this interview, I went back and watched a number of the episodes that I had access to, and I think I noticed some things just about your style. I noticed a number of crane shots. I noticed the use of light, especially in the Stargate Atlantis episode that you directed when the
I love that show.
When the characters were in like a treehouse, there was a really nice use of light there. And then
that was a great series to work on. I wish I had done more of them, but it was a political nightmare. So,
oh no!
But I had a great time on that show. I spent years just trying to get in there, and then when I finally got in, I just killed myself trying to make this really great episode. It's called Childhood's End. Yeah. From the first season of Stargate Atlantis. And I loved the people, loved working with them, but I just, for various political reasons I won't go into, wasn't asked back, but I had a great time. And a lot of fans really reacted to that show, which made me feel good, and it ended up winning some awards, and it got me a ton more work in other series. So I was happy. I was fine, but I would have loved to have done more of them. The one thing I'm really proud of is I try to move the camera really often.
Yes.
I don't like to. I have a mild kind of ADD, so I don't like to. I get really bored really easy, so I'm always trying to move the camera. I use Steadicam almost constantly. There's a new poor man's process with Steadicam called the Ronin camera system, which I love using. But if you watch my stuff, especially the later Hallmark movies, stuff has to move for me. Otherwise, I always feel like why do I watch this? I'm going to flip the channel, So I try to suck viewers in with a lot of camera movement.
Yeah, I was going to mention that as well, because I noticed that too. I noticed, there's a lot of close-ups that kind of move into two shots and different things like that.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
And Matt, have you subjected yourself to any of the Hallmark Christmas movies?
I'm more familiar. I'm more familiar with your genre work, I have to say, the science fiction and that.
That's all right.
Yeah, so sadly, I have not seen some of the Hallmark movies.
Well, did you know that 85 million people watch those Christmas movies on Hallmark Channel?
I do. I know that they have an incredible following. Yes.
Yeah. And one of the challenges for me was having fun trying to make them. People say, "You do these Hallmark movies?" I say, "Yeah. Have you ever watched one?" Because I'm really proud of the work I've done with them. I think they're very emotional, fun, funny movies. I try to make them just different than what people expect, and we've had a lot of success. And Hallmark's had a lot of success doing some really cool little stories in the last 3 or 4 years. They just celebrated their 10th anniversary of this Christmas, extravaganza of the Christmas movies that come out basically daily over November, December.
Yeah. Yeah. I didn't have, I noticed that I obviously I checked out your credits and had noticed those on your credits. I just did not have time to figure out exactly where those would fit in my, trying to catch up on some of those, but I will definitely check them out.
How about vampire series? Do you like vampire series? Because I'm super proud of Van Helsing too, which is on Netflix right now.
Yeah, I only got to watch one episode of that because I had heard of the show and I didn't realize that you were directing for it until I read through your credits. So I watched one episode that you did of that, and that is something. It was I enjoyed it very much. One thing that I was just struck with, and this was something else that I was just going to ask you, because I kind of back to back I watched an episode of Earth Final Conflict that you directed, and then I watched the Van Helsing show, and I was just thinking about how much television has changed in that time period. Is just incredible.
Yeah, it's very well, it's also because, in the old days there were like 3 networks you could watch. And so things had to be a little more toned down.
Yeah.
You couldn't get the kind of violence and the kind of language. And it's not that I approve of some of the language and stuff. I think some of it's a little too far for TV, but that's just because I got kids around, right? But I think it certainly opened the doors for lots of, big feature directors to come in, like obviously, The Irishman with Scorsese getting released basically on Netflix. I think it had a little theatrical release at the beginning, but it's definitely changed the whole business and it's opened up a lot more to different styles and things that are now available on TV. Mm-hmm. It's funny that you mentioned Earth Final Conflict because, I don't know if when I started making TV shows and movies, it was all film, right? We'd have film rolling through cameras, and that's how old I am. And I'm trying to remember what year it was. I think it was 80, or maybe later, but maybe it was in the 90s. But when they first started HD television, one of the very first shows that ever used HD was always bragged about being ER, George Clooney's hospital series. Do you know what the very first series to actually shoot digital was actually Earth Final Conflict.
Oh, wow. I did not know that.
Cool.
Yeah.
We beat them to the punch, but then, because ER was obviously a huge hit.
Yeah.
You got to take the credit for it, but we were actually shooting digital before they were, which was fun.
Wow. You mentioned how fast paced the business was. Has that changed any since 24, 26 episodes a season to 10 episodes a season?
No, it's if anything, it's more frantic.
Wow.
The product is just kind of churned out. I wish they would do the 22, 26 episodes a season. I think it's just a budgetary thing. Like Van Helsing from season 1 was doing just 13 episodes, and they're really good episodes.
Yeah.
And they don't necessarily shoot them they don't take any more time to shoot them. It's still a kind of frantic, crazy pace, and there's so many effects and things involved that I don't know if the frantic level is about as exactly the level I've always seen in television, but I don't know. I kind of like the longer seasons. I think fans kind of prefer the longer seasons for storytelling too. But I guess in some ways it just means you have to pack more into 13. 13 seems to be kind of a normal now. 10 and 13. I know Criminal Minds is just doing 10 episodes this final season.
But I mean, to me, that is such a huge change because, trying to, you hear, some people will say, oh, I binge watched this entire series. Well, going back to Earth Final Conflict or Andromeda or, Stargate, you're just like, that will take me a year to watch those. Exactly. I mean, there's just so many episodes.
Yeah, no, I know.
Yeah.
No, I love that. The one series that I'm guilty of binge watching too, like everybody else. But I remember for me when this whole, drop a whole series on Netflix or drop a whole DVD series started, the thing for me was 24 because I love the 24 series.
Oh, yeah.
And I used to watch 24 every December over about 4 days. And then I need to take like tranquilizers and sleep for a week because it was just so intense. It was like cliffhanger after cliffhanger. So those are the kind of series that I loved. But it's definitely changed the way people watch things, like in the old days, I guess, maybe, well, you're way younger than me, but even you probably remember when you'd have to wait out every week to watch an episode of your series that you like.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I grew up on Star Trek The Next Generation, like I said, and it was just, that had to become my thing, right? It was just like every Saturday night, I think at like 10:30, I just had to be there to watch an episode.
And have you seen any of the new Picard series yet?
I have not. I know it just dropped as we're recording this. It just dropped yesterday, so I have been seriously, talking with my wife, who's a Star Trek fan as well. So we might watch it here shortly.
That's good. It's got mostly good reviews, some bad reviews, but it's kind of interesting. I'm watching. I'm a big fan of Patrick Stewart, obviously.
Uh-huh. So, did you like it?
I haven't seen it yet.
You haven't seen it yet?
I was curious if you had seen it. I'm hoping to try to get to it at some point. But
yeah. Well, I guess the main issue for us is just, do we pay for another streaming service?
Exactly.
I don't know. Yeah. I mean, we already have a couple, so do we pay for that? So it is interesting, that you can just that there's just so much content and there's this so much, so many things that you can watch. But I'm thinking too, just a little bit. You talked a little bit about coming into a series, after, in later seasons. And what is it like to direct an actor who may have been playing a character for 3 years before you get to direct them? Do you I'm just trying to wonder, it's just like they would probably know the character
inside out. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Inside out. It's definitely, it's definitely a bit of a challenge. I think, there's a lot of, you just have to bring a respect to the thing. I mean, that's probably why I kind of prefer working in the MOW world and the feature films, just because you're able to be there on the ground floor and they haven't kind of set their character in place. But I don't know. You just have to respect the fact that these guys have been playing these parts for years. And it's like, the challenge is, how am I going to tell this guy how to do something different when he's been basically living and breathing this role for 4 years? So
yeah.
But it's a challenge. But like I said, and with the television, it's always more fun to come in on the ground level, just because you can be part of that whole character building thing, which is fun.
I don't know. This question might be a little bit into the weeds, maybe for some listeners, but since I studied filmmaking in college and that, in shooting some footage and things, I was always. I don't know. I was just always watching kind of like when two people are in conversation. And I do this now, even when my wife and I will watch movies and we'll watch TV shows, and I'll say something like, oh, well, they just kind of used over the shoulder shot like the whole time. I kind of became obsessed with, trying to figure out different ways to shoot two people when they're talking. And so I just using this as you want to
know my secret?
I definitely do. That's where I was wanting. This is kind of an opportunity. Like I said, it might be a little bit too much in the weeds for some listeners, but I've kind of wanted to know, how do you break the over the shoulder kind of, shooting two people talking?
I never, when I'm reading a script and people are sitting at a table talking, when I'm shooting the movie, they aren't. They're walking down the street, or they're walking around the house cleaning, or they're going up and down stairs, or they're going around their house. And if I absolutely have to have them sitting talking, the camera is rotating around them in a huge circle.
Okay.
And it is strictly whatever creativity I'm bringing to it is entirely because of my short attention span. I'm always constantly, like a lot of the Hallmark movies, you'll read, two people come into the kitchen and talk, and it's like, no, they don't. They're going to be walking around the house, or they're going to be playing tennis or something. Like I always have to pump some motion into something, because I think, whatever you do as a director and a writer and a producer and a maker of this kind of entertainment, you're always trying to suck people into the story, and it's just vastly more interesting to see movement. And so I can count on one hand the times I've actually done as we call them, kitchen table dramas, where you have people just sitting talking. It's boring. Can't stand it. So I'm always trying to just keep people moving. And the thing that's cool is, well, Steadicam allows you to kind of have a third character with the two actors. You're kind of dancing with them. And actors love movement too. They don't like to sit. I mean, some actors are like, no, I just want to sit here and talk. I want to. This is Shakespeare. This dialogue is so amazing that I'm saying I just want to sit here and have you just feel the dialogue, which is rare. Sometimes it happens, but what I think always helps performance and the writing is just to create some movement. That's my cheap trick.
I don't know. Maybe this is a little specific too, but I watched one of your episodes of Andromeda. I think it's called Pride Before the Fall.
And it was the 100th episode.
Yeah, that's right. I was just thinking of a sequence in there where, like, we see Rade in his like bedroom or his quarters or something, and you start the shot on a lion's face, like a statue of a lion, and then kind of pan over to him, and then you end the scene with a rack focus from Rade back to the lion. And I was just wondering, obviously there's a storytelling technique there, right?
Matt, you're testing my memory now, because it was 15 years ago.
No, I understand. I knew that when I was going to.
That sounds really cool. I'm sure I planned that for days. The thing with Steve Basic, who's a friend of mine who played Rade, who was just great in the show. He was just so physical and so kind of lion-like and stuff. And I remember we were looking for anything to try to always associate him with beasts, because he had this kind of beast sort of character. And I think, as I remember, because it was a long time ago, that fight, I sort of vaguely remember that. I think we were just always trying to tie him into the animals. Kind of like, do you remember, here's a really old reference that nobody's going to remember, but 1960, Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho. Remember, Norman Bates has all those stuffed birds of prey all around him in the hotel. And the way they used to shoot him was framing with him, with a bird kind of over his shoulder. And probably there's something I stole from Hitchcock. Okay, I admit it right here.
Well, if you're going to steal,
steal from the best.
Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you for humoring me. I know that was a long time ago and stuff, but it was just interesting to hear kind of things like that. I think sometimes people don't realize what thought the director and the actors are putting into little set pieces and things like that, because everybody loves TV, everybody loves movies, and we just take them in. And then I think just so often we're just clueless on how they're made. And, we might realize like, oh, I like that, or, oh, that seemed better than this one thing. And that was really powerful, but we have no idea what's kind of going on behind the scenes.
Yeah. Hopefully it's well, the thing is too, if you're really noticing, then we're not doing our job properly, right? We're trying to hide things. That particular episode you're talking about, Pride Before the Fall, was so weird, because it was the 100th episode, and we had everybody on set while we're shooting. Entertainment Tonight was there, and ABC and CBS News, and everybody was there, because when you do a 100th episode, that's when all the press comes out of the woodwork, and they want to do special episodes. And so we basically shot that episode around Kevin Sorbo being interviewed by everybody on Earth. And it was like, we'd have our cameras there, and then we'd have all these other cameras. I didn't know which cameras we were playing to, because it was like, so I've never seen so many cameras on set. But it was a fun episode, and it was great for Kevin. He was very proud of the fact that we got to 100 episodes, which is pretty rare.
I guess what you mentioned, cameras there, are the episodes shot with a single camera, or do you have multiple cameras, or has that changed over the years?
No, I pretty much have always shot with at least two cameras if we can. Sometimes you get a third camera in if there's a stunt sequence that you're trying to grab. And the reason you do it, obviously, is just it's economical, because obviously, in theory, you shoot the show twice as fast because you're doing your close-ups and your medium shots kind of in the same time frame. But I think one of the reasons I love it is you really don't wear the actors down. They don't have to do 30 takes of something. They can do it in 12 takes or 3 takes as opposed to 6 or something, and you're getting a lot more coverage, which makes the show look richer. mean, it's nothing that I invented. I mean, it's like Richard Lester in the early Beatles movies, I think, was where they started using multiple cameras
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of the stuff which seemed new back then. But it speeds up the process, and you get a lot richer looking coverage of sequences and stuff. And I love it. I think it's become a sort of a norm now. I think everybody shoots at least 2 cameras on shows.
Even on the Hallmark movies of the week?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. I haven't shot with a single camera in probably 15 years.
Okay.
It's just, it's kind of archaic now. It's like, the costs have dropped so that it's not necessarily twice as expensive or anything. It seems way more economical to have other coverage happening at the same time rather than just trying to do a bunch of different angles of something. You might as well just shoot it simultaneously. And then when you do the next bit of coverage, you move those 2 cameras to different places. And that's what kind of gives you the richness and coverage of scenes.
My podcast is mainly focused on people who play tabletop role-playing games like Dungeons & Dragons. And I wanted to ask you said you hadn't played, but you have done something else with Dungeons & Dragons. Could you tell us a little about that?
I'm trying to remember what. I've had some connection with it a lot. I've shot a lot of people playing Dungeons & Dragons. I can't remember what series. I've done a lot of kids series for Nickelodeon and stuff. Mm-hmm. We created, games for some shows. And as I mentioned to you before we started taping, I think Big Bang Theory has really exploded Dungeons & Dragons to the mainstream. I think a lot more people are aware of it because of Big Bang Theory. I think it's because the characters play it so often. But
yeah,
I love that kind of stuff. And it's weird that I've never played it because you think I would have, because I was a geek and I still am, and I'm a sci-fi guy and all this kind of stuff. But I just what I love most about what I know of it is just the sort of mind expansiveness of it, the fact that you live in this kind of fantasy world, and that's kind of why people, when I was growing up, were reading books and science fiction and stuff, and now you can actually be interactive with it, which is so cool.
So I was going to ask, since, when you play a tabletop role-playing game, you're telling stories. You're sitting around the table telling stories. The game masters or the dungeon masters, have to help the players run the story. But then, of course, the players are also adding to the story as well. So I was just going to kind of ask, just like, obviously, since you've done so many movies and so many television shows, what are some important keys to storytelling that somebody should be aware of if they're going to sit down and tell a story?
Well, I don't know if you're familiar with I'll just give you an example. I don't know if you're familiar with the John Wick movie series.
A little bit. I haven't seen them yet, though.
Yeah, I just recently discovered them. I watched 1, 2, and 3 just in the last month. I never saw it when it came out in theaters. And one of the things I love about the movie is the clarity of the action. I don't know if that makes sense, but the movie is very, I don't know, you've probably seen a lot of action movie or two where you kind of get just lost in who's fighting who and what's going on.
Yeah.
And there's a very certain style, the John Wick series, which I just love. And I've heard people comment in the making ofs and stuff about. And I think the storytelling element that I love about it is it's very clear. It's not confusing. Mm-hmm. They tend to shoot a lot of long takes, and even for an action film, and wide shots and stuff. So you don't kind of get, because I find as I get older, it's probably age, I get lost in some of these action movies. I don't know who's fighting who, and I don't know what's going on, and it kind of pulls you out of the story.
Yep.
So one thing I've really learned is to try to be not being boring, because you're trying to be interesting the way you're staging things, but it's good to be clean with action sequences and have people be able to follow what's going on. And it's tricky to learn. Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure if I think I do it well, but I'm not sure. I mean, it's a commendable skill for action directors, I think. So that's one sort of storytelling element that I think is important.
Yeah. And I know exactly what you're talking about, because there are some movies where it's like, I know somebody got punched in the face, but I'm not sure who exactly was punching or whose face it was even sometimes.
You remember Ridley Scott's movie Black Hawk Down?
Yeah. Yeah.
When they made that movie, they realized halfway through, I think, or I heard in some of the behind the scenes interviews, that everybody's wearing a helmet and they couldn't tell the characters apart. So they started writing the last name of the characters on tape and putting it on the helmets as a way of clarifying what was going on. And I thought, gee, that's scary.
Yeah.
Because with short haircuts and helmets and dirt on the face, everybody looks the same.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And all the guys are like clean shaven and everything. Yeah. So yeah, it's just, well, I'll tell you, just since you mentioned Ridley Scott, he does a fantastic job of shooting two people in conversation. I just never know what angle he's going to pick when he's shooting two people, and it's amazing.
He's one of the maestros.
Yeah, just absolutely amazing.
I'm a big Stanley Kubrick fan, and I'm very sad he's gone and not making movies anymore. But Ridley Scott's a genius.
Yeah.
Blade Runner was brilliant, and
Oh yeah.
and he's, I love the Alien series and stuff.
Yeah,
Well,
sure.
not all of them, but I love most. And our own Canadian James Cameron did a pretty good job on the second Aliens too.
Yeah, pretty good, I guess.
He relaunched the franchise. No, I thought he did a great job.
Yeah, it's amazing. I know the first Alien movie looks like it was shot yesterday. It was made in 78, 79.
Yeah,
and then Aliens. Yeah, Aliens was a phenomenal follow up.
Alien was such an incredible science fiction movie, and then Aliens was such an incredible action movie and horror movie all at the same time. So they're both brilliant. So Matt, what's your favorite Best Picture Oscar this year?
Oh gosh, I haven't even been following.
I make it sort of as fun when the Oscars come out. I go and see all the movies. I try to see all the movies. I've got about 3 left of the 9 this year. But
I
highly recommend everybody go out and see Parasite.
Parasite, okay.
It's an amazing Korean film. That just, you talk about surprises, like you never know where it's going to go.
Mm-hmm.
It's an amazing roller coaster.
Yeah, I haven't been following it, but I've been hearing things about Parasite, so I'll definitely have to put that on the list. Any new movies? Yeah, any movies you would recommend anybody to catch up on?
Well, I just saw Jojo Rabbit last night.
Okay,
fascinating. I'm a Tarantino fan, so obviously I liked Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I thought it was, and I lived in LA for 20 years, so I know some of the areas pretty well.
Okay.
What else is out? I'm going to try and see 1917 because I'm always fascinated by these movies that try to do things in a pseudo single take. I don't think it's a single take, but I mean it's a disguised kind of way of presenting action, which I love because it's fascinating. And it was directed by Sam Mendes, who directed what is my favorite Bond movie, actually, Skyfall.
Yeah, I've been wanting to see 1917 as well. I'm interested in World War I history and things, and then I was reading about how they did like the one take. I think they said there were several dozen cuts actually, but they disguised them all. Yeah.
Well, it's very similar to Birdman. I mean, sure there's going to be cuts in the movie, but the point is, if you feel like there isn't, that's the whole effect, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
Obviously they do cuts with wipes and going inside and outside and doors opening and things. There's also ways of hiding the cuts, but that's not the point. The point is, if you feel like it's a continuous event, that's what sucks you into the drama of the scene of the movies.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, David, what does the future hold? What are some projects people can check out?
I mean, I'm hoping to obviously do some more Hallmark movies. Then Helsing starting up for their 5th season in production this year, so never know what'll happen with that. The 4th season, just keep working, keep them busy.
And I will make sure in the show notes for this episode at dicegeeks.com, I will link up your personal website as well as some of the TV shows and movies that you have directed so people can check those out. So David, thank you so much for being on the show today.
You bet. Thanks, Matt. Thanks for asking me. People can follow me on Facebook and Twitter, and I'm even on Instagram. So keep making movies.
Okay, there you have it, guys. Oh my goodness. I could ask David a million questions about filmmaking, about the TV industry, about the film industry. Oh my goodness. I hope you guys didn't mind some of my digressions into shot composition and things like that. It was just a dream come true to be able to talk to such an accomplished film director like David. So thank you for bearing with me. I hope we can take some things out of this episode when we're running games. Now, I know some of that might be a stretch, but just listening to David talk about how he's setting up a scene and how he's telling a story with certain elements and certain characters, I just found that fascinating. I think we can just kind of take all of these things, add them to what we're already doing, and we'll just be better game masters and better role players on the other side. So thank you so much for listening to this episode today. If you want some free stuff, please head over to dicegeeks.com/free. You will get 10 free dungeon maps and some other resources you can use in your campaigns, and you will never miss an episode of this show. Now, guys, if you want me to keep seeking out some of these awesome guests and interviewing them, then please head over to patreon.com/dicegeeks and consider supporting the show. It would mean the world to me because any support that I receive is just a vote of confidence that I should keep making this show. And also, if you cannot financially support the show, I totally get that. I totally understand. If that is the case and you really enjoy these episodes and you like these interviews that I do, consider leaving an honest review on your podcast app of choice, whether it's iTunes or Stitcher or Spotify or wherever you're listening. Those reviews just help out the show, help people find the show easier. You could also tell a friend about the podcast. Seriously, guys, word of mouth is an incredible thing. So if you are a game master or a role player and you enjoy listening to these episodes and you have friends that role play, let them know about the show. Just say, hey guys, I listened to the show. It's called Dice Geeks, dicegeeks.com tabletop RPG show. And he interviews all these awesome people, like a film director and a TV show director who's directing episodes of Van Helsing. I mean, are you kidding me right now? This is amazing stuff. So guys, if you can do just any little bit, it is most appreciated. So guys, again, I just thank you so much for listening and tuning in. I will be back next Wednesday with another interview of some awesome, cool, exciting person that will help us learn more about our world and history and help us to become better role players and better game masters. So until next time, keep gaming.